Wouldn't it be better if you put her someplace?
You mean an institution? A madhouse?
You just found the marble in the oatmeal. You're a lucky, lucky, lucky little boy. Do you know why? You get to drink from the fire hose! Okay, you ready? Open wide! I feel like I'm taking crazy pills!
Hey, you want to see crazy?
You really are crazy.
I don't get it, Doc. I mean, how can all this be happening? It's like we're in hell or something.
No, it's Hill Valley, although I can't imagine hell being much worse.
Now you want to get nuts?
Shut up, you freak!
Come on!
I said shut up! It's a madhouse! A madhouse!
Hello and welcome to Movie Madhouse, a show about the movies that have been lost to the annals of time. I am Travis Fishburne.
I am Alex Brunel.
And tonight we will be discussing Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, a classic from 1989.
Yeah, a movie lost to nothing. This is a very popular film and has been for over 30 years.
Yes.
And rightfully so. This movie's great.
Yeah. The Joe Johnston directorial debut.
Yeah. Thank you, every human, for joining us this week. As the last couple weeks, just want to say there's still huge social change happening in the United States right now. There's still a lot of protests going on and a lot of positive action being taken on the part of active citizens. And I do want to just say that the cops who killed Breonna Taylor have still not been arrested. So please don't stop the work. The work is good and the work is starting to work. And if anybody has VHS or mini DV tapes that you're interested in preserving, with the proceeds going to Black Lives Matter or another progressive organization in that realm, just get in touch with me on Twitter or on Instagram at Alex Brunel, and we can set that up.
Yes.
And with that, let's get to our show. We have a little bit of news at the top.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. First off, today it was announced that Michael Keaton is going to be playing Batman again.
Yeah. I could not believe that when my brother texted me. I thought for sure that they were just going to do something like that was going to lead to something like him voicing Batman in some like DC cartoon, because they do a lot of those things.
Would make sense.
Which, even though Kevin Conroy still does that a lot, does the Batman for that kind of stuff a lot.
I saw that, and then my other thought was, oh, is this going to be for whatever CW does this year for their their big crossover event?
Right.
Because,
I still need to watch Crisis on Infinite Earths, because that sounded kind of awesome, actually.
yeah, because it seemed like they got everybody but him that go around. But no, it's for an actual theatrically released Flash film, Flashpoint.
Right, which my brother informs me. My brother is a DC guy. So my brother informs me that's in its terms of what it does to continuity is not unlike Crisis on Infinite Earths, and it's just kind of a retcon way to solve a lot of disparity, which is honestly exactly what the DC movie universe needs. I think after I have watched all those movies. I don't like very many of them. I've seen all of them.
I have not.
Oh, yeah, that's good. You can just straight up leave a lot of them alone.
Go straight to the Snyder Cut.
Yeah, straight to the Snyder Cut. But I mean, it's funny that they would do something like that in a cinematic way, because that's what they did to their comic books, right? Like, whenever the continuity in the comic books got too disparate and weird, they just blow it up and call alternate universes and like do all this weird retcon-y stuff. And now it looks like they might be doing that same thing to the film franchise, because they kind of handled the canon and timelines just as badly as DC ever did in the comic books. So I'm sure...
And in record time.
In record time. I'm sure there's comic book nerds out there who would vehemently disagree with me, and I'm sorry, and they are probably correct and more informed on this issue than I am. But yeah, so that's it. Yeah, Batman is going to be Michael Keaton again. I also read today that on the set of Spider-Man Homecoming, Tom Holland said that Keaton would like frequently sneak up behind him and just go, "I'm Batman," and just quote Batman while they were shooting that movie. So I'm excited that the audition tape that was Birdman went well.
Yeah, because then he got to literally play a Birdman and then Batman again.
Yeah. And on the Batman tip, and many other films, Joel Schumacher passed away today, which is super sad news. I mean, probably my favorite Schumacher film is Lost Boys. I love The Lost Boys. Mm-hmm. It's a great movie. I also really love Batman Forever. I think Batman Forever is a really good movie.
That's the one I watched the most as a kid.
I can understand why.
Obviously, yeah, the other ones as well, but yeah, Batman Forever. That's when the toys got interesting.
And it takes a lot for a director to admit their past mistakes sometimes, I think, and the way he kind of owned up to what happened with Batman and Robin I always thought was really admirable. So yeah, bummer. It was cancer. Super bummer.
Oh, yeah, I did not know that.
Yeah. Star Wars.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, in a weird way, there's like connections between like the original Keaton Batman film and the film we're discussing tonight, because Batman was released on June 23rd, 1989.
Yeah.
So 31 years tomorrow. And Honey, I Shrunk the Kids was released on June 23rd, 1989.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. They were both released on the same day.
Day and date. Wow. Did not know that. Did not know that these were concurrent films.
Yeah. One of the notes I have is a lot of people speculate that this film did so well its first few opening weekends because of the overflow from Batman, people showing up and it being sold out, and they're like, well, let's go see Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, which must have been huge for Disney, because Disney was not in the greatest place in the late 80s.
They were not.
I don't know a huge amount of Disney history, and we'll get into it a little bit. There's a little bit to say about that with regard to the background of this project, but yeah, that's interesting.
89 was like the beginning of their comeback with this film in the live action form, and then Little Mermaid animated.
Right, and Little Mermaid was 92 or 91?
I believe it was 89.
Oh, was it 89?
Yeah.
All right, well.
Confirm that.
Yeah, well.
And then on the Schumacher note, Joel Schumacher's directorial debut, it was 89 for Little Mermaid.
Oh, wow.
Little Mermaid.
Well, I'm wrong.
But his directorial debut for a theatrical film was The Incredible Shrinking Woman.
I don't know if I remembered that.
Yeah, with Lily Tomlin, and which this film obviously kind of references a lot of the similar things that happen in that movie and in The Incredible Shrinking Man. It's kind of an homage to those movies.
Yeah, totally. So, interesting. Did not know.
Yeah. Other than that stuff,
I also, that one bit for me is apparently MTV is developing a whole bunch of Daria Spin-Offs, which is really weird. But the first one is apparently a spin-off about her friend Jodie, and that's gonna go ahead as a series at Comedy Central. So that's interesting. I love Daria as a kid. I love Daria now. Daria holds up like crazy.
Yeah, it's been decades since I've watched it.
It's still great, man. It's cool that I just like that it's still present in the pop culture, and that anybody's still talking about it, even in development. And if it winds up in more Daria adventures, I'll be very happy. But we'll see where that goes.
Oh, bring back Clone High.
Oh man,
with Miller and Lord blowing up right now, they could totally do it.
Dude, I've been so desperate for a revival of Clone High for so long. For anybody listening or watching who doesn't know Clone High was an animated series on MTV 2002-ish, 2002, 2003, that was co-created by Phil Lord and Chris Miller, who are responsible for 21 and 22 Jump Street and the Lego Movie, and Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, which is actually super solid, and were originally going to be directing Solo before Disney was like, this is not working, please save us, Ron Howard. They co-created it with Bill Lawrence, who created Scrubs and Cougar Town, and there's other Bill Lawrence shows that I just don't know what they are. And it's about a weird government experiment where they decided to clone famous historical figures, but the result of that is they're all about the same age at the same time because they just cloned a bunch of them at once. So it's Clone High, where Abraham Lincoln is best friends with Gandhi, and they're good friends with Joan of Arc, and Joan of Arc is in love with Abe, but Abe is in love with Cleopatra, who's dating JFK, and man, it's good. It's a great, real funny show.
Oh yeah.
I don't think it's even streaming. I have my Canadian DVDs.
As do I.
Nice.
I have gotten rid of the majority of my physical media, and one of the ones I held on to, I was like, Clone High. I can't imagine it becoming available anytime soon.
No. Yeah, that was such a great series. I cannot encourage anybody to check that show out more. That show has my absolute highest recommendation. So funny. So great. I'm going to rewatch Clone High. It's only 13 episodes. You can watch it in like a day and a half. It's great.
Do it.
Yeah. Okay, should we get into Honey, I Shrunk the Kids? HITSK, as it were.
Yeah. Well, we can also, I'll briefly talk about the last episode of the Disney Gallery Mandalorian show, terrible title.
Yep.
But it was revealed today why they went with that, because it wrapped up on Friday, and now they're continuing this multi-episode behind the scenes stuff with the making of Frozen 2.
Oh my good God.
So,
are they going to do that for 8 episodes?
6 episodes.
Oh my God. Who is that for? Who is that for?
Don't know.
Like, Star Wars has like adult fans that are interested in the behind the scenes. Like, I can't. Are 4-year-olds interested in 6 hours of making of content for Frozen 2?
Yeah, not even like the original Frozen. Just like, I don't know. I guess now that they're making stuff, they're specifically shooting things with the intent to, like, I guess, release it on Disney Plus now.
Right. Sure.
So
that means
when there are cool things worth watching, that's fun.
You know what? Below the line people got paid, and as a below the line person, I'm for it. I'm for more jobs for below the line people.
Yeah.
Hire me, Disney.
Do it. And also, with the Mandalorian Gallery series wrapped up, they did the final episode, which was entitled Connections, and it is, like, by far my favorite episode of it.
Cool. I'm behind. I haven't seen that episode yet.
It begins with the Camtono scene, which the Camtono, for people who don't know, we can throw up that visual. It was canonized as a Camtono in the episode where Werner Herzog reveals it. But prior to that, it was just an ice cream maker that Wilro Hood ran around with in Cloud City in The Empire Strikes Back. And so the first 5 minutes of this episode, Jon Favreau, in their roundtable with all the other directors, is explaining to everybody. He's explaining to all these other directors the origin of this and the fact that
nobody else knows that this is a significant object, because these other people that are in it are not like the other directors are not the kind of Star Wars nerds who are like, why is that guy running with an ice cream maker?
Yeah.
They're not those Star Wars nerds.
He's explaining this to all of them, and he's also explaining to them the running of the Wilro Hoods, which happens at every Star Wars celebration, where everybody puts on an orange jumpsuit, a fake or real mustache, and an ice cream maker, and they all just run around chanting ice cream, ice cream, ice cream, ice cream all day long. And Jon Favreau is just explaining this to everybody, everyone's mouth, like, except for like Dave Filoni, who's very familiar.
Right, Filoni knows.
All the other directors are just kind of like mouth agape, like, oh, okay, so that's a thing. It's one of my favorite things that I want to participate in someday.
And speaking of Star Wars TV, Did I also read a rumor this week that like Filoni is kind of officially been named within Lucasfilm as like the control brain for Star Wars television?
Oh, I have not heard that.
I think that's a rumor I read.
Very
this
much
week.
on board.
Yeah, that needs to happen. If Disney doesn't understand why that's an absolute necessity on their part, I don't know if they understand what they're doing yet. But
hopefully, the past year,
yeah,
just put that in perspective for them.
I would hope so. So yeah, I hope against hope that's true, because there's no one perfectly nerdier than Filoni, which I've only really learned in the last like few months that Filoni is that good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
with that, I think we can finally get into Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Yeah, HITSK. I feel like literally everybody that's watching this has an idea of what this movie's about, so I'm just gonna go with IMDb's short synopsis. A scientist father of a teenage girl and boy accidentally shrinks his and 2 other neighborhood teens to the size of insects. Now the teens must fight diminutive dangers as the father searches for them. That's the long and short of it. Dad shrinks kids. Kids have an adventure in what was once a small but is now a big world. And it's a happy ending because there's a Disney film. It's a Disney film.
Yes.
The background of the project is interesting, and I was telling you, Travis, I should have done more research about this. Most of my info comes from like IMDb and Wikipedia and a few other sources. There's a good article by Kelly Conda from 2018 called That Guy Who Made Reanimator Got Disney Back into Family Films, Stuart Gordon's Journey to Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. It's on the website weminoredinfilm.com. I would have liked to read this article a little bit more in depth, but I only got to like kind of skim it. But so it was originally brought to Disney by Stuart Gordon and Brian Yuzna, who have come up on this show before for like unrelated reasons.
Week.
Yeah. And just to refresh about who those people are, Stuart Gordon is best known as the director of Reanimator. Brian Yuzna is perhaps best known as the director of Society and Bride of Reanimator, although they have both made a great number of films, B-movies, horror movies, cult things. The movies that they worked on directly leading into Honey, I Shrunk the Kids were Reanimator, From Beyond, and Dolls, the first 2 of which are Lovecraft adaptations, the third of which is a creepy doll movie.
It's terrifying.
And so
if you're a little kid and it's on in the middle of the night and you're like, oh my God.
Apparently what happened with Gordon is what happens with a lot of filmmakers when they have kids, which is he wanted to make a movie that his kids could watch. One of his daughters was in Italy with him when they were making dolls and asked which dolls she could take home, not realizing that they're demon dolls. So he's kind of like, oh, I should make a movie that my daughter could enjoy. And thus the idea to kind of do a children's film was born. And like we said, Disney was not the company they are today in 1989. They were not like this huge corporate hand that had the sway that they do now. So the proposition of two guys who'd been making horror movies coming in and saying, we have this idea for a kids film is not like, I feel like, as unlikely as it maybe would be now. And they were hired. Gordon was hired to direct, and Yuzna was hired to produce. It was originally called Teeny Weenies, and it was written by Stuart Gordon, Yuzna, and Ed Naha. And Ed Naha co-wrote the screenplay to Dolls, actually. And Gordon was originally supposed to direct the movie, but 2 weeks before, they had hired the DP, they had storyboarded, they had hired visual effects people, and then 2 weeks before they were to start shooting, Stuart Gordon got a massive nosebleed during a production meeting and had to go to the hospital, and the doctor said that it was a combination of stress due to Jeffrey Katzenberg and high blood pressure, and he was told he would literally die if he directed this movie. So he had to step down. Joe Johnson was brought in to replace him, and Joe Johnson was the one who suggested changes to the screenplay, which he found to be too special effects heavy, and he didn't feel the characters had much dimension, which, given the movies that I know that Gordon and Yuzna have made, I believe that. and brought in Tom Schulman for the rewrite. But I did notice in one thing I read, there was an earlier version of the script where there were actually 5 kids, and one of them died during the sprinkler chaos. And that sounds much more like a Stuart Gordon, Brian Yuzna movie to me. A movie about 5 children and one of them dies. Yeah.
Which, I mean, watching the movie with that in mind, I was like, oh, that would have been just so terrible.
I know, it would have been so wrong.
Like, how could they have recovered?
No, like the movie is so great, and bless their hearts, I'm a huge fan of Stuart Gordon and Brian Yuzna. I've met both of them at like screening events, or more accurately, at Stuart Gordon at a play he directed. I've had the monograph. I'm like fanboys for these dudes, but I do have to say that this movie would not have been as good if they made this movie. The original title was Teeny Weenies. That's silly.
And then it went through several title changes they're working on. The Big Backyard was one.
Not bad, but actually no, that's a bad title.
Grounded was another one because I thought it would appeal to the teens because they would
identify with being
meant.
grounded was. Yeah. Not good.
But they wanted a title that like kind of like told you what was going on,
right?
Because it's this high concept film, and it's
yeah, and it's a great title. I think Honey, I Shrunk the Kids is a great title.
Yeah.
They apparently were scolded by some sort of a teaching organization for using the word shrunk instead of shrank.
Yeah, it's grammatically incorrect.
Should we talk about the Japanese title that you sent me the poster for? Micro Kids.
Micro Kids. It was called in Japan.
I love this title and this poster. This artwork is fantastic.
Great.
The artwork is so great. But man, Micro Kids, and I like that Moranis Rick. I like that on the poster too.
Oh yeah.
Chevy Chase and John Candy were both in the running for the lead character that Rick Moranis wound up playing, but Candy is the one that actually suggested Moranis, which was history repeating itself. Literally the same thing happened on Ghostbusters, as they had originally approached John Candy to play the role that Rick Moranis played, and then Candy was like, "I think you should get Rick."
Yeah, Louis Tully. Yeah, with the Ghostbusters thing I read up on, and John Candy didn't understand the character, and he's like, he should have a German accent and have a bunch of German shepherds. And like Reitman and everybody, like, I don't know, John.
I don't know, John.
We've already got enough like dog references. So it went over to Moranis, who said like he instantly understood the character, and that's very apparent in Ghostbusters and here. Yeah.
He's so great. Oh man, it's so great to see Rick Moranis again. I mean, just like watching him again, because I don't, he hasn't been present in Hollywood for so long, and I haven't seen this movie easily in 20 years, I think.
Yeah. It's so good.
I don't have a ton of other. Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, buddy.
Oh no, just the Rick Moranis performance. It's awesome to go back and just revisit the him and his prime. Yeah, which is just Rick Moranis, because
so great.
Every other actor has like this prime time, and then his is like, no, we kept it that way.
Yeah,
and
there's a few other little interesting details. A bunch of it was filmed in Mexico City. I guess they built stages in Mexico, and some of the exteriors were shot in Mexico. The neighborhood was not a real neighborhood. They were building sets and stuff for 9 months, and they built 12 houses complete with front and backyards for that neighborhood.
That's just so crazy.
It seems so wasteful.
They don't do that. Like, they didn't do that back then, and they don't do it now. Where they're like, we've got a backlot, we've got a suburban neighborhood.
Yeah.
Not, let's go to Mexico City and build a set.
Yeah, it's weird, and like I've worked on some of those backlots, and you feel like they just look and feel like you're in a suburban neighborhood. It would have been fine. And
I could not believe this was like not shot in California when I was reading up on that.
Yeah,
like,
me
really?
either.
Shot in Mexico? That's weird.
I also thought weird. One And apparently the production company, which is Doric Films, like the actual like team that was doing it, they took two. Travis, we lost your visual.
Oh no!
I'm gonna keep.
Let me.
I'm gonna keep telling about this thing.
I'm
you're
back.
back. Great.
Just that still.
You're frozen, but.
I meant to send you a technical difficulties gremlin.
Well, it's okay. This is a good. At least the freeze frame is picturesque. You look good. But apparently the production company took pictures of two houses in Coronado, California, with the intention of filming there. Oh, you're back. Hello.
Hello.
Great. And then after they sold the script to Disney, Disney recreated those houses on the lot in Mexico, and the homeowners threatened to sue Disney if they weren't paid, so Disney paid them.
Wow.
I've
got another note in here about Disney paying somebody because of being threatening of being sued.
Yeah, the music.
Yeah, it's based on what I think is one of the best things about this. I don't know. There's so many good things about this movie.
Oh yeah, James Horner's score is incredible in this movie.
Yeah, the James Horner music is just the best. My notes in here about the James Horner score is when James Horner had balls.
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
When I've been listening to the soundtrack for the past week, and when I learned like a little while ago that James Horner was the one who did the music for this, I was like, what, James Horner? Which it just doesn't sound like him. It's such an outlier, and it's
very big.
Yeah, it's so big. It's got so much personality. It's experimental.
Mm-hmm.
It's, it feels like because the 80s were when Danny Elfman started to take off with Oingo Boingo, and then the Tim Burton films, and it feels like he was like, let's do something kind of like that.
Yeah.
And there's even the beginning of one of the cues in this film sounds very much like the beginning of the Breakfast Machine.
It absolutely
and
does.
Big Adventure.
The twinkling, the toy piano, absolutely.
Yeah, it's just such a fun, awesome soundtrack.
It really is.
The whole opening, the animated opening that it has, with that music, just like that music just screams to me danger.
Yeah.
But like kind of like adventure. And I've always felt that way about it, where it's just, there's this real intense, like, oh my gosh, this is dangerous.
Yeah.
And it's just, yeah.
It also has
such a signature.
It is, and it has a real sense of fun too. Like, even there is that danger, but it's like it's honestly like, a great John Williams adventure score. Not in a Williams style, but it has a lot of the same hallmarks. Where it's big, it's bombastic, the themes are memorable, and it conveys the emotions correctly. And just to go over, we all know Horner scores. He scored a lot of the Star Trek films. He scored most of James Cameron's filmography, including Titanic. He did Willow, both Cocoon movies too. I learned both of them. But as you were alluding to, the film score heavily references and interpolates Powerhouse by Raymond Scott, which you may remember from old Looney Tunes. That piece of music was also repurposed in a They Might Be Giants song called Rhythm Section 1 ad. And that's just a hugely popular piece of music that the ripoff was way, way too blatant for Scott's estate to not notice.
And he never credited it, and he never acknowledged it.
No, but they were paid.
Yeah. So the estate threatened to sue, and Disney paid an undisclosed amount in an out-of-court settlement.
Yep.
Which
I guess Disney just does.
We'll talk about the sequel at another time. But I've always been aware that this movie and the movie that comes after have two very distinct scores that sound really nothing like each other.
I don't remember the score to Blew Up the Kid very well, actually, at least off the top of my head. So that'll be interesting to revisit.
Yeah. So reading this, I'm like, oh, that might be why they, went with an entirely different direction in the sequel.
Could be,
as far as how it was scored.
So yeah, I guess this is a good way to transition into the personnel. We mentioned that Joe Johnston directed this movie. This is his directorial debut. We've talked about Joe Johnston on the podcast before because hello, Ewoks films. But he was also like second unit director. Before this, he's also second unit director on Batteries Not Included. He was a producer on Willow. He'd go on to direct The Rocketeer, Pagemaster, Jumanji, Captain America. So we talked about the screenwriters a bit. Tom Schulman, who is the guy brought in to rewrite the script when Joe Johnston came on board, also wrote Dead Poets Society. He wrote What About Bob, which I was kind of really chuffed to learn because What About Bob is absolutely like in my top 10 of the early 90s, I think. I really, really love What About Bob. And then wrote Eight Heads in a Duffel Bag, which I haven't seen in many years, but I've heard is not very good. And Holy Man, actually, which is a movie that we talked about this. I liked this movie a lot growing up. Revisited it recently. It was a bummer. It's not good. So yeah, that was interesting to learn that stuff. Hiro Narita was the director of photography, who doesn't have like the most impressive filmography, which surprised me because like I think the cinematography in this movie is fantastic.
Yeah, I think so too. Especially with all the shots that the two different worlds that had to be created in the way that it had to line up. I think they did a very good job with that. Yeah,
it all hung together beautifully, due in large part to the way it was shot. He also was the DP on The Rocketeer. He also did The Arrival with Charlie Sheen. Then seemed to slip into a bunch of B movies. But one thing I did notice is we watched Tummy Trouble. Oh, right, we didn't mention Tummy Trouble. Tummy Trouble was a Roger Rabbit short film that played before the film theatrically and was before the film on VHS. So we also did watch Tummy Trouble.
Yes, we did.
Which is available on Disney+. And I've made a couple notes about that when we get to the viewing notes part.
You can throw up the... I don't know.
Oh, yeah. I have Tummy Trouble.
Yeah.
Tummy Trouble.
So, this movie, like the Tummy Trouble Roger Rabbit cartoon and the movie are just like forever linked in my mind. It's hard to like think of like one without the other. And the fact that James Horner also did the score for Tummy Trouble as well, and again relied heavily on Powerhouse, which makes sense because it's like in reference to like old Looney Tunes cartoons.
Yes.
It's also, it was a weird revelation to me when I realized that Joe Johnston had directed this movie when I figured that out, because for the longest time I associated this movie with Joe Dante because it felt Joe Dante-ish, probably because of the score, the fact that it relies heavily on Powerhouse, and it feels very Looney Tune-ish.
Yeah, and I could absolutely see your reasoning in that.
Yeah.
Man, can't beat those early 90s Joe Dante movies either. But yeah, Tummy Trouble was really fun. Hiro Narita was also the director of photography on the live action portion of Tummy Trouble. Which Frank Marshall directed, that little live action portion.
I saw that in the credits and I was like, Frank Marshall? Oh.
I also want to point out, so I messed up. I didn't look up the animation director on Tummy Trouble, but it's not Richard Williams, who is the animation director on Who Framed Roger Rabbit, who is a master animator. And there's a very long story about Richard Williams and how he was kind of wronged by Disney, actually. They totally stole Aladdin, as a concept from a film he had been working on for almost 20 years prior to Disney going into production on Aladdin. This whole thing, it was called The Thief and the Cobbler. Read about it. It's an interesting thing. But Richard Williams has a brief appearance in Tummy Trouble as the voice of Droopy Dog, and it was actually an outtake line from Who Framed Roger Rabbit that was repurposed in Tummy Trouble. So that was a nice little connection. I also, as I was watching Tummy Trouble, I wished desperately that Disney would allow their classic animated films to look like this scan, because I don't know if you've revisited Robin Hood or any of the really classic Disney things. all the grain is scrubbed out of them. The colors are amped up in like such a weird way. They look too clean to me.
Yeah.
Just for my personal taste in seeing film matters in a high def digital world. The scan of Tummy Trouble looked really beautiful, and I wish more Disney animated things would look that way on the streaming service.
Yeah. It's ironic because they probably just, right,
they probably just scanned it.
Do as much work to this one.
Exactly.
Let it go.
They scanned it, cleaned up the dirt, and put it up, and it looks great. And I wish that they would allow other parts of their history to go up in a more authentic looking way.
Yeah. The animation director for Tummy Trouble is Rob Minkoff, the director of The Lion King.
Oh, okay. So yeah. And I was kind of hinting about this when we were talking before the show. A name I noticed in the credits of this movie, but that is not on IMDb, is that Rich Fichter, director of photography from Adventures in Dinosaur City, was the director of photography of the visual effects in this movie.
Oh, wow. One of the few people from Adventures in Dinosaur City to have more credits.
Yeah, and that was... I don't know, that's really interesting to me, because it's like, I feel like a lot of these films that we've been talking about from this era share a lot of DNA in terms of design and tone and all these things, and it's interesting to find the people that cross over.
Yeah.
And then there's other crew people I just wanted to give a shout out to because their work was so beautiful. Aside from all the effects people who, like, I would literally be reading the list of the entire effects department. So I encourage people just to go and read the names of the people who made these beautiful things. But Michael A. Stevenson was the editor. I wanted to just cite that because the movie is really tight. It's a really great cut. He was an in-house editor for Disney for a long time. He cut 3 Men and a Baby. He did Honey, I Blew Up the Kid, Sandlot, Jungle to Jungle, Flubber. Nice little history. The production designer was a guy named Greg Finesca, who was production designer on Nightmare on Elm Street 1 and 2, House, Critters, both Wayne's World movies, and Coneheads. Unfortunately, he was also the production designer on Soul Man, which is the film that stars C. Thomas Howell lying about being a black person to get a minority scholarship to go to college, and then does most of the movie in blackface. That's a real movie from the late 80s.
They're not going to remake that anytime soon.
I do not think so. And then I wanted to just call out the art team. Dory Cooper, art director. John Iacovelli was an art director. Macedonio Ramos was set decorator. Beautiful work. Carol Brolaski was the costume designer, and she only has 2 credits. On her whole IMDb, there's 2 credits for the woman who designed the costumes in this film, which I think are really great earthy costumes. I love the way the kids look by the end of it. I think it's fantastic. And another name I noticed on IMDb was an uncredited on-set technician named Emmanuel Vunozis, and I just wanted to call that out because that's a guy I know. He's a DP that I've worked for, and he's a really nice guy, and apparently he was some kind of an on-set grip or tech or something for Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, so...
Awesome.
What's up, Manny? You're never going to see this. But Manny's a nice dude. I like him a lot. So yeah, I think that's what I got for the crew. What we got for the cast, Travis?
Oh my goodness. Well, this is top billed with Rick Moranis, of course, which we've already discussed, Ghostbusters, Strange Brew, so many others.
Spaceballs.
Spaceballs, yes. He was blowing up in the 80s. And then Matt Frewer, who played the neighbor and the Thompson kids' father. He played Big Russ, which he's most notable as Max Headroom, probably people know him as.
Yep.
And then looking at his IMDb, I did not realize he voiced Panic in Hercules.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that either, but that makes a lot of sense.
As soon as I read that, I was like, oh, yeah. I mean, Pain obviously is...
Right.
Why am I brain farting on... Bobcat Goldthwait.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah.
Matt Frewer, I've loved his work for so long. I've always really liked Matt Frewer, and it's from an early age, probably because of this movie. But he just seemed to pop up in stuff that I would see a lot. I think one of the other ones that was a weird thing that I watched a lot when I was a young person was Fox made a TV movie out of Marvel's Generation X, which was in their X-Men family of books. And it was kind of like a pilot for a series that never got picked up, but it aired as a TV movie, and he was the bad guy in that. And he is just like around. I just rewatched the TV adaptation of Stephen King's The Stand, where he plays Trash Man.
Yeah, I saw that as well. I'm like, oh, he was in that.
Yeah. Matt Frewer is an absolutely indispensable character actor. He's a really, really wonderful performer, and I love seeing him any chance I get.
And I did not realize that he played Moloch, the Mystic, in the Zack Snyder Watchmen.
I didn't realize that either. Or
Yeah,
I didn't remember that. I probably remembered at the time.
Here's my Watchmen portraits book.
Yes.
I did not make a visual note of that, but I was like, I can show it off.
He's got such a great, distinctive face. Like I just love him. He's wonderful, and he's a working character actor. If you've watched TV at all in the last 25 years, you've seen Matt Frewer in something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we've got Christine Sutherland, who played Mae Thompson, and she's most notable for Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which I'm not very familiar with Buffy at all, but I saw that seemed to be the most notable thing that she was in.
Yeah, that's absolutely what I know her from most outside of this movie. I've seen all of Buffy, I think, twice, yeah, Buffy fans will remember. There's a specific episode that I don't want to go into spoilers for the show, but there's a episode that's very memorable for fans that centers around her, and it's actually like a deeply, deeply upsetting episode. It's great. It's really great, but she's wonderful in that show. She's a wonderful mother actress, I guess. I don't know.
And then we've got Christine Sutherland. Wait, that's who I just said.
Marcia Strassman?
Yes, who we know recently from a film we've already covered called So You Thought Your Parents Were Weird.
Yep, we do.
Where she plays another mother to some kids who were making inventions in the garage this time, not the attic.
This lady just keeps marrying scientists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It still strikes me as weird that she would take that job after this job.
Yeah. And at the time, like, she knew, I mean, the success of this movie was so big, they were already rolling, at least in pre-production, on Blew Up the Kid, where she played, the same character again. So it's not like, I don't know. It was just an interesting, typecast situation where she took that on. And then we've got Thomas Wilson Brown played Little Russ, and he's not a big filmography on him.
The kids didn't do a lot in general, as I recall.
No. Yeah. And then Jared Rushton, who played Ron Thompson, the little brother, he probably has the best list, because he was the best friend Billy in Big.
Oh, that's right.
He was also one of the kids in Overboard, and he was in Pet Sematary 2.
Oh.
And just like looking at, I've not seen Pet Sematary 2. I've only seen the first one. But looking at his character, he seemed to play like kind of a bully, which I'm like, yeah, you get this. He has a very Tom Felton, Draco Malfoy.
Thank you. Yes, that is absolutely a good way to put it. Because, like, I spent so much of the movie wanting to punch this kid. Actually, he's a little jerk ass. Yeah, he's a little jerk for most of it. I mean, he gets feelings at one point. But,
yeah, Auntie helps him out with that.
Yeah, I mean, all the characters have arcs that they realize. So, everybody's a nice person at the end of it.
And then Amy O'Neill played Amy Zielinski.
She's
She
great.
seemed to have, quite a recurring role in The Young and the Restless before this movie.
Interesting.
And then both Amy O'Neill and Jared Rushton were in a failed NBC pilot for a show called Where's Rodney? Are you familiar with this?
No, but I love that you're talking about a failed pilot.
Is
it available to watch? Is it on
I
YouTube
don't
or
think the whole
something?
thing. The intro at least is on, and it's about a kid. It's about a 12-year-old boy named Rodney Barnes looks for advice and inspiration from his idol, stand-up comic Rodney Dangerfield. And it's a show in which this kid, in school, he occasionally can summon and teleport Rodney Dangerfield into his life to give him advice.
Wow.
And NBC, it's listed in IMDb as a short movie.
Right, that's how they list unaired pilots.
Yeah. And they actually aired it. Yeah, they did. They had not ordered it to series, but they decided to just air it one night because they thought people would mistake it as a Rodney Dangerfield special.
That's so weird. I'm gonna have to find somewhere where I can download Where's Rodney, because I'm looking at a couple places. It's floating around. It's around.
Yeah, it's got a young Breckin Meyer in it.
Why would who were these agents that were like, yes, Rodney Dangerfield, perfect for children? A lot of people were doing cocaine in the 80s, Travis. A lot of people were doing cocaine.
And it's got a real sweet theme song, which everybody in the podcast just heard.
It was produced by Aaron Spelling Productions, apparently. Oh, boy.
And then Robert Oliveri, who played Nick Zielinski. He was in Edward Scissorhands as Kevin. But really, that's about all he did.
Yeah, he didn't do much. He was in Honey, I Blew Up the Kid. He reprised his role in Honey, I Blew Up the Kid, right? Yeah.
Yep. After that, he basically, that was his last role. And he decided to just start a family in Florida, apparently.
That's nice.
Yeah.
That's nice.
I
can imagine, if you had a good enough deal and you did Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, that probably pays for most of your life. I don't know, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. And then we got some brief little appearances. There's one from Kimmy Robertson, who played Gloria.
Be Still My Heart, Miss Kimmy Robertson. I realized watching it this time, I don't think I've watched Honey, I Shrunk the Kids since the first time I watched Twin Peaks, which was sometime when I was a teenager, because I had no idea Kimmy Robertson was in this movie. But it makes sense because I do remember my first time watching Twin Peaks, kind of feeling like I was familiar with her, but not being able to place her. Mm-hmm. And I've seen her in a bunch of stuff since, and I've met her a couple times. But I did not really realize she was in this movie. So when she showed up, I was just like, oh, Kimmy's here. And her movie husband, Mark L. Taylor, of course.
Yes. Is in Inner Space, Arachnophobia, Homeward Bound.
He's a face you recognize, I feel like.
Oh,
He's a character actor. He's been around for forever. He's wonderful.
And then we got Carl Steven, who played Tommy.
Yeah. What do I recognize him from? Can you tell me? Do I recognize him from anything?
Nothing big.
Okay.
The biggest thing I can tell you is he was young Spock briefly in Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock.
I'm on his IMDb. I can tell you what I recognize him from.
Okay.
And it's the Weird Science TV show.
Yeah. That'd be it.
It was the Weird Science TV show where I think he probably played a younger brother or something. I'm not totally sure. But, yep. Definitely it's that.
He was also the voice of Fred in the A Pup Named Scooby-Doo TV series, which...
That's funny.
My kids are watching right now. So
true fact, A Pup Named I went on a animation cells search on eBay the other day because Travis, you linked me to a place where I could purchase some animation cells from Adventures in Dinosaur City, which I then did. I am now soon to be owner
nice.
of 2 animation cells from Adventures of Dinosaur City. But I learned that
Inspired from Fantasia.
yeah. But I did learn also that a pup named Scooby-Doo sells on eBay incredibly cheap. Like you can go and get like a $2 animation cell from a pup named Scooby-Doo if you're so inclined.
Well, maybe my kids would be interested.
Just something to keep in your brain. But you mentioned the huge Star Trek, like kind
Yes.
of everybody that was in this movie was in an episode of Star Trek. Should I throw that imagery up here?
Yeah. I thought, I always find it interesting when there's like Star Trek connections. So in this image, we see Matt Frewer. He was in an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation where he's playing a guy trying to get some technology from the future because he's a time traveler.
Of course he is.
And then we see Mark Taylor there. We see Carl Steven as young Spock. And then we see Amy O'Neill with young Wesley.
Yep. Yeah, great assortment of Star Trek. I mean, I can't imagine a world where Matt Frewer didn't end up in Star Trek. That would have been just a sadder place.
Yeah, he made more appearances in I think Deep Space Nine and Voyager
as different characters. I'm sure.
Yeah. There were so many times during our Star Trek watch where we're watching and multiple people come up different times.
Yeah, I believe. Yeah, because that was TV, man.
Yeah, that's how they did it.
And then, did you want to talk about this other image yet, or not quite yet?
We can go ahead and do that. The film, was obviously a huge success, and Disney at the time, like in '89, that's around the time that MGM Studios was opening, and so they built an attraction that was a huge play set, and it was, if you ever just imagine yourself wanting to dive into the world of this movie as a kid and slide down the grass blades and see giant rolls of film and bees and the giant Little Debbie.
I always saw I always saw commercials for this when I was a kid, and I always desperately wanted to go.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. It was really good times.
Where did you say that was? Was that at MGM?
That was at MGM Studios, which is now called Hollywood Studios. And the space where it used to be is now where Galaxy's Edge is.
That's right. I knew it was something that replaced it. For some reason in my head it was like Cars World or something that replaced it, but Cars World replaced something else worthwhile. Maybe like the Hollywood Backlot Tour. I don't know.
Maybe.
There's something that like Cars took over, and I was just like, oh, that's sad. But that stuff all looked amazing. We also have this
also very intimidating as a child. I think I remember the first time seeing it being kind of scared because everything.
Did you get to experience this yourself?
Yeah, and intimidating. Yep.
Oh, that's amazing. Was there? I can't quite. No, that's not it. That's not a giant cigarette butt in this attraction, is it? I don't think it is.
No. I don't have the image in front of me.
That's okay. But I don't think it is.
I think it's a crayon.
Oh yeah, that's what that looks like. And then you sent this other picture of an actor and a kid.
Oh yes, because
this movie is being sequelized.
Yeah,
rebooted
like
/
sequel reboot. They announced recently that there's a movie called Shrunk in development, in which Josh Gad will be playing an older version of Nick Zielinski.
Because we as a people are now just stuck with Josh Gad for however long that runs. I'm sorry, I don't love Josh Gad. He's fine. I have nothing against him. He's probably a nice dude. He's been doing good stuff during the quarantine. Thumbs up for Josh Gad as a human.
I totally buy him as an older Nick.
Totally. This is great. Physically, this is great casting into it.
Mm-hmm.
And Rick Moranis is going to be back in that as well.
Yeah,
Rick Moranis is unretiring.
Insanity.
Yeah.
Because also in preparation for this movie, I watched the Prop Culture episode in which they they dove into the props for this movie.
Right. And just to make sure everybody knows what we're talking about, Prop Culture is a show on Disney Plus where they take a movie and talk about all the props for that project. And they did an episode on Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Mm-hmm. And in which they found out that the original prop for the shrinking machine just kept getting altered for the sequels
and repurposed.
They didn't leave it alone. They just kept messing with it, which I was like, what? Why did they do that? And then you see what it looks like by the time the third film rolls around. We have that image.
Yeah, that's up right now. I like the way it looks in the third film. I think it's a cool design. Mm-hmm. It seems like a natural, like, sleekifying evolution of the original, like, mad scientist version. So I think design-wise it's very nice, but nothing beats the beauty of this original object.
Yeah, but not at the expense of, like, messing with the original prop. I thought that was crazy that they just didn't leave it alone and built a new one.
Man, I don't think that I think that if, like, you're making a direct-to-video sequel in 1997 and they're like, where can we save a few $1,000s? They're like, well, we have this original prop and we can just, like, put stuff on it rather than building it again from scratch. And some accountant was like, yes.
I guess. But anyway, in that Prop Culture episode, they actually undo all the changes that they did, and they rebuilt it to look as it did in the original, which it's such a character in and of itself, and the way that it moves.
Yeah. It's a wonderful design too. It's an absolutely wonderfully crafted thing. Just the craft in this movie altogether is unbelievable. Unbelievable craftsmanship all throughout this film.
Yeah. And in that episode as well, the host sits down with present day Rick Moranis to talk about the movie, which is, I was like, wow, I was not expecting this. This is great.
Yeah, that interview is nice. That interview is the only part of that. I find Prop Culture to be a very crass show. I don't really love it. And it also struck me as they're doing this new film, right? And I can only imagine that they restored the prop only because they need to use it in the new movie. And they're like, oh, how can we milk this money we're putting into it? Let's make a show about it.
Wow, that makes sense.
That's my postulation.
That absolutely makes sense.
So we'll see if it makes an appearance. If it makes an appearance, I just want to say I called it.
Oh, I'm sure it will.
Yeah. So
the Rick Moranis interview in that episode, I was like, can we just like watch like however many hours they did of this uncut?
Right, like the full. I would love to watch this because he was such like a quiet and introspective kind of interview. This like really reserved kind of personality. I did really like his bit. Like he apparently still has Wayne Szalinski's glasses because whenever movies because he wears prescription glasses, so whenever a movie would get made, they'd make glasses for his character and they'd make 2 pairs and he would always take a pair home and then just get spare glasses. So he just has like the original Wayne Szalinski glasses somewhere probably, and a bunch of other really cool classic Rick Moranis character glasses, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it is great.
We didn't really talk about, but Rick Moranis, we did say how he doesn't make movies anymore, and he retired, and that was because of the passing of his wife, and he wanted to focus on his family and his kids and raising them.
Yeah.
So that's why he ended up stepping away from Hollywood and everything.
Yeah, which admirable, incredible. He did make an album in his retirement time, a country album called Agoraphobic Cowboy, I think is the name of it.
The previous interview I'd seen with Rick Moranis most recently was him discussing his music.
Did he discuss his first album, You, Me, The Music and Me?
Oh, I don't know.
That album's from 1989 is hysterically out of print. Like, it's unbelievable how hard it is to even find a copy, let alone afford a copy. And the final track on the album is him covering Autobahn by Kraftwerk. It's really weird. Just seek out. Maybe you can find a clip of Autobahn as performed by Rick Moranis and just put it into this podcast.
No, if I did, everybody just heard it.
Yes.
Know that I really tried.
Manifest the Secret. I think if you can't find it on YouTube, I can send it to you. I have it somewhere.
Oh, nice. So you're all hearing it anyway.
Yeah.
I think that might be the extent of my notes prior to us actually discussing
our
the
viewing
movie.
notes. Yeah. We're into it. We're an hour deep into this podcast already. So strap in, y'all, because we still got like our viewing notes from this movie. I guess I do want to say too that like personally for me, the way that I like learning all this background information and presenting it within talking about the movie, because as I've grown older and as I've learned new ways to appreciate the things I love and all these things, I've found one of the things that's most interesting to me is placing a creation into its context. And with films, that means to me figuring out who made it, what other stuff they worked on to bring their own creative DNA to a particular project, and the way all these things come together. That stuff's always incredibly interesting to me. So that's why I always really enjoy like just clicking through IMDb and seeing what else these people have worked on, and like, you know, what else the cast has done and these kinds of things. So, and when we're talking about a movie as big as Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, I guess that ran away with us a little bit, and we wound up talking about that stuff for like an hour. Yeah. But I think that's okay.
So much stuff to talk about. Yeah. And I cut the stuff I was going to talk about in half.
Yeah, there's more. I mean, like, this is not one of the movies that we're going to be like the podcast authority on. Like, for future generations, we are the only word on like, and you thought your parents were weird. But like, we're like a drop in the voice bucket for Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. But this is what's interesting to us about the movie. Yeah. So yeah, let's dive in. Opening title sequence. Holy crap, it's amazing. It's beautiful.
I love it.
It's the perfect opening to this movie.
Yeah, the whole animated sequence paired with the James Horner score is just incredible. Like I said, just the excitement and the danger that accompanies it. And they just don't make opening titles like that anymore.
No.
You used to see these animated opening titles a lot back in the day. Mm-hmm. And I have a note that this was like one of 3 that year. The other one being Christmas Vacation and Troop Beverly Hills.
Interesting. Yeah, it was definitely a motif for a while. As was a credit sequence. And that's still a kind of, you know, there's still credit sequences, but they're not. I haven't seen one like this in a long, long time.
Yeah.
And then after this, the wonderfully animated opening titles, which I always loved the visual of like the kids like pushing through the plastic window of the envelope after they get stuff into the mailbox at the very end. Mm-hmm. I always loved that visual. And we get back in, and then we go into the live action part of the movie. There's this opening scene in the kitchen is not unlike other opening scenes that we've discussed before, where the camera visually goes over a bunch of objects while a character talks off screen and kind of fills us in on what these people are like.
Yeah, it's another inventor house.
It's another inventor house.
Back to the Future, just like, and you thought your parents were weird.
Yeah, how many houses with labs have we watched now? Is this 3 or 4? I think it's 3.
It's at least 3, because Adventures in Dinosaur City had the very nice one.
Yeah,
which paid an homage to this movie.
Totally. Then Parents, and then this. Oh, that was quick. That's nice. Okay, cool. Because I didn't want to go on too much without like being able to bounce stuff off with you.
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's okay. Nick, the youngest child, is working on a tiny version of the shrink ray, which I always thought, number one, we see that before the shrink ray, which I think is a really cool like visual foreshadowing of what we're about to see. Like the little scientist who looks like his dad, because he's wearing his lab coat and he's got similar glasses and similar hair. We see the miniaturized version of the guy and his toy, and then we cut up into the attic and we see the real version of the guy and his toy. But also the little version always kind of reminded me of in Short Circuit 2, at the beginning of Short Circuit 2, after the movie, in the first movie, their program gets shut down. So the guy who designed the robot, Fisher Stevens in brownface, has made like miniaturized versions of the Johnny Five robots and is like selling them on the street in New York City. So like that always kind of made me think of that, like, oh, a small version of a cool thing that I like. I wanted to make the note, like, I loved Amy getting tangled up in the phone cord in this scene too. That's just like one of those things that's like lost to time, getting tangled up in a phone cord.
Yeah. Kids watching this one today are like, what's that?
Yeah, right.
What's that material she's caught up in?
Wayne Szalinski, inventor of early texting for the household. Instead of coming down or using any kind of an intercom system, he uses a keyboard and a receipt printer to communicate from the attic to the kitchen, which is just great. Yeah, Matt Frewer, best, always and forever. We have the first instance of him trying to use the shrink ray when it just blows up an apple. I love that the computer that's animating what's going on also visualizes the apple disintegrating.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, and then breakfast scene. We see their weird household phone with the weird like mannequin finger that lifts up or down. I think that whole setup.
It's like, what's the point of it having a finger?
I think the whole setup for that, because where they have the phone resting, I think that's a modem. So I think like it's set up like to remotely dial up whatever version of online access there was in 1989. I don't think it was called the internet yet. Maybe it was. I don't know. But if Wayne Szalinski needed to chat with his buddies on like the BBS boards and talk to the other scientists, although I don't think he had any other scientist friends based on a couple scenes from here. But there's also just like a big floppy disk drive hanging out, like a big 5.5-inch floppy disk drive that's hanging out on that table by the telephone too.
Yeah, they did such a great job with the production design and all the inventions in the house. It's
beautiful. It's beautiful.
Invention houses, in the 80s.
Yeah.
There's nothing like them. There's the Inventor Dad from Gremlins, I think of as well.
Yep.
Just
Inventor Dad was like a trope, kind of.
It was.
Yeah, man. I mean, and it's not just the design in this movie of like these incredible like household or homemade science project things. Like just the craft of every level of the fabrication of this movie, like the scale stuff. Everything. It's just beautiful. Like, I didn't even make the note that often because, like, literally every time I saw a new thing, I was just like, oh my god, this is beautiful. But it's, how can you just, we can't spend an entire podcast just saying, like, every single prop is beautiful. But every single prop is beautiful in this movie. Great work, team.
Such a good job.
It's also in this section of the movie where we get the weird family call that the families say to each, like, kind of criticize each other when, like, the Russell family are just kind of getting ready to go fishing, and Wayne Szalinski calls them a weird family. And then Matt Frewer responds with weird family to himself when he just sees a teenage girl dancing, which seems like a weird thing to think that's a weird family for, but whatever.
Yeah.
I think one of the funniest moments in the movie is Matt Frewer trying to lift a barbell.
Yeah, Sarah pointed this out to me, that Matt Frewer throughout the whole movie was very much, he was doing like Jim Carrey before Jim Carrey even like came out onto the scene. Yeah,
that's actually super true. He does a lot of that kind of stuff in this movie.
He does like a lot of the face stuff and all of the physical comedy. You're like, oh, I could see if Jim Carrey was like more, I mean, he was obviously in some things prior to this, but if he had been who he was in the early 90s prior to this movie, you'd think like, oh, this guy is, ripping off Jim Carrey to a degree, but
no, it was Matt Frewer.
Maybe Jim Carrey was inspired by
maybe, dude. I mean, like the fish, like you said, the fish thing and the little reeling him in, handshake, weird dance. Yeah, he does a lot of and like with the arrow getting stuck to his head too. A lot of the work in that scene.
Also, to take note is Matt Frewer was 30 when they shot this.
Oh yeah, I read that too. He does not. Matt Frewer, I guess, has not aged well in his life because he looks way older than 30 in this movie.
So, like, the age difference between him and Little Russ is 14 years.
It's not that much. Yeah. So then we get the shrink ray activation. Right, that's what happens. The ball gets hit through the window from next door, and conveniently activates the machine in a surprisingly plausible seeming way.
Blocks the laser,
Which I don't understand why, like, yeah, I don't, that's the one bit of the movie's, like, nonsense science I never understood, where it's like, I don't care, like, movie nonsense science, sure, just tell me what the science is supposed to be and I'll believe it for the sake of the movie. But it just seemed to me like the laser is its own, like, separate aspect of the entire build and seemed to be necessary within the thing. But then you find out, like, oh, the laser was destroying everything. Then what did you think the laser was doing? I'm very curious to what the laser was supposed to be doing.
Sent to?
Yeah, like, why was there a laser in the first place? And then even later at the end of the movie, when he figures out, when it gets communicated that the laser was blocked because of the baseball, he just blocks the laser again with the baseball. He doesn't, like, he doesn't deactivate the laser. He doesn't, like, remove the laser. It's just like, oh, we'll just put the baseball back. Great.
Mm-hmm. Which, again, that was one of the very few props they still kept.
Right, the baseball itself, which is pretty cool that they kept that.
Yeah. Got it signed by the whole team, too.
There's a funny line when Russ and Ron come over to the Zielinski house where Amy's like, Nick, take him up to the attic and get his ball. And as they're walking away, Nick just mutters, "This is what's wrong with the American system of justice." Which I'm just thinking, like, yes, Nick, in your, like, 8-year-old estimation, that is what's wrong with the American system of justice. Yes. That's just really funny.
Yeah. It's a few good lines. And then they go up there, and then the comment is made, your dad's still in contact with his own planet.
That's a good line, too. And this is all while Zielinski Wayne is at his conference and failing in front of the other scientists, and they're hostile to him. That was really weird rewatching this. I'm like, why are these scientists not just, like, dismissive, but, like, hostile? Just, like, really angry at this guy. Like, why? Like, is he the nerd that's even picked on in the community of nerds that he's supposed to be, or, like, part of? Like, well, a room of angry science dorks is just funny.
Yes. Well, there's a funny line at the end of this scene which might actually, headcanon explain that.
Oh?
Which is his colleague is, telling him, like, oh, it's all right, you can give him time. And the last line that he says as they're walking away is like, you were right about the electric flea collar. The extension cord was a bad idea. Which implies some terrible things. So yeah, maybe true. Wayne Zielinski might be responsible for a death of one of their pets. And they're all upset.
I could see that being that. All right, I'm down with that headcanon. I'm there. I'm with it. So then the kids get shrunk. It's chaos.
Along with some furniture.
Right, the furniture gets shrunk, which is great. I always loved the microscopic little couch, too. Then of course, when he comes... I mean, this fast forwards a little, but when he comes back and the couch is gone, he's like, oh, well, the couch is gone, too. Which, a giant piece of furniture disappeared in my house along with the kids, I'd be like, well, he doesn't notice it until he tries to sit down.
Yeah,
he just sits down by muscle memory and the couch is gone. And he, like, I do like that he goes on his little rampage destroying the machine, although that I wonder if there was something, because it does show him, like, reconstructing it a bit, but I wonder if there was ever a version of the script where, like, that was a bigger deal, because he kind of, like, really messes it up. Yeah. I did think it was funny when Wayne is sweeping up the room and the kids are running away from him to try to avoid being swept up, which of course they are swept up, and that's how the movie really gets going. But they have the Prometheus running away problem where, like, there's the giant thing coming at them and they could just run right or left, but instead they run directly away from it and then are eventually caught by it. But if they had gone right or left, perhaps they could have escaped.
Or
same problem when the
jumped
ship
into one of those little cracks they were trying to avoid her.
Yeah, that would have worked too. But whatever. I mean, that's fine. But just the Prometheus logic, I call it, because
yes,
that I can't remember who died, but that guy didn't have to die. He just could have run to the left or right. I really like Prometheus, by the way, too. So.
Oh yeah, me too.
I like all the Alien films, all of them, except AVP Requiem. Don't really like that one so much, but all the other ones I'm good with.
Which
James Horner.
Yeah, he
did
Aliens.
the score for Aliens, so it's a connection there.
And that's a great score.
Yeah.
So yeah, then the kids get out of the house. They're put into a garbage bag, and the next time we see anything is they use, I guess, a small shard of glass to slice this hole in the garbage bag, and that's when we really first see the scale of the giant backyard world. I always loved the visual of cutting out of the bag too. It always, like, whatever thick sheet of vinyl they used, like, really was like, oh, this looks like a plastic bag. I don't know. It all works so well aesthetically and like in a physical way, in a physical tactile way. All of the things that are playing as enlarged versions of themselves really feel correct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, from the instant they get shrunk down in the lab and they're on the floor, and all of the details there, it just feels so right.
Yeah, totally.
And I'm just in awe immediately of, like, once again, like we were talking about with toys, in the lab and then in the backyard, just the huge giant sets that they made for this.
Just absolutely incredible. The backyard set is like, oh my god. And then, like, pretty soon even we're treated to a wonderful bee. This bee is amazing.
Yes.
I love all the effects work on the bee. The bee POV photography is just, like, so funny, and it's really, really good. It's really good. It's really good.
How do you think they shot that? Because I think they probably used a similar method, like with the speeder bike sequence in Return of the Jedi. Or I think there's probably like a guy with like some kind of a gimbal, and he's shooting it at like a slow speed, and then they speed it up.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah, that would have been some kind of rig. It didn't seem like it was Steadicam, but maybe it was Steadicam and just kind of like wobbly Steadicam. But it definitely seemed a bit undercranked when we were in the POV camera, to give it that extra kind of intensity. Which is, like, if there was one kind of like fault in the physics of any of this, it's that, and it's not even a fault because it's supposed to feel this way. Like the little objects are now huge to the kids, and to convey the hugeness, the objects all kind of move with like a boom, boom. Boom. They all kind of move in a little bit of slow motion when they wouldn't. Like, it would just be like this really intense chaos, like when he's destroying the machine in the lab. They're trying to get away from like this little resistors and stuff. Like, that would just be like tick, 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 and like really fast, but for the sake of the kind of grandiose nature of what they're seeing, it's a little bit slowed down. So it's not really a fault of the physics, but just like the movie plays with that kind of stuff.
It's stuff that they do, like, it's always been kind of a trope, and kind of portraying large things, and it's something they still do. Disney still does to this day with, like, Ant-Man. When he becomes Giant Man, they do the same stuff where he moves slowly. And I'm like, why isn't he moving quicker
at normal speed? Yeah, it's an aesthetic thing. It's the bee, and then after that, Wayne discovers the machine works. He kind of figures it out. And now that's when we really start getting into the great physical comedy that we get from Rick Moranis in this movie, when he first goes out with the crutches and the binoculars attached to the helmet, and like tramping along the lawn, and the hose and sprinkler antics and the huge chaos it causes. What a great sequence in the movie that is. Like,
yes,
the sound design, wow. Like,
the
wow.
score,
yeah,
just
the
cutting to a bunch of different things.
The droplets of water, like they're bombs going off everywhere, is so great. It's wonderful visually. The sound that accompanies is so great. And like whatever they did, like, it wasn't water. It was like some kind of like goo. It was some kind of something viscous that they were using. So like, it gives us this really goopy, gross texture, which like gets really gross when Big Russ or Little Russ has to save Amy from drowning in mud. Mud looks really gross.
I remember that in this movie as a kid. I'm like, remember how the water looks when they're small? Because
It's gross. Which, like, given their size and the surface tension of water, that's probably more or less how it would actually look on something that scale.
or they would not sink at all. They might even be able to
Maybe they would float.
be on top of the water.
Yeah. But yeah, what a great sequence. Yeah, it's around the time we meet the Forresters and Kimmy Robertson and blah blah blah. Oh yeah, and it's about this time he makes the hammock.
And she's like, he's so worried about the Forresters and the fact that they can't go, and what is he gonna tell them? And she's like, why don't you like tell him the truth? And he's like, what kind of an excuse is that?
What kind of an excuse is we don't know where the kids are? We can't tell them that. Yeah, what a weird dad reaction.
Yeah.
And tells him instead that his wife is feeling. I think he kind of just implies that his wife is on her period, and like that's why they can't go.
I'm like, is that what he's implying?
Yeah.
And somehow that's more acceptable than my kids are missing.
Yeah, that was weird. I don't understand. There's no actual plot function of those characters at all. They come and Russ makes an excuse and they leave, and that's it.
All they do.
That's it. Like, it could have just been like, oh yeah, we rented a cabin and it's $80 deposit, and that could be the $80 deposit. Great, but like the character, yeah, it's weird. I wonder if those were like a vestige left over in a way.
Yeah, possibly.
Or if there was more of them that got cut somewhere else.
Maybe that fifth kid that died was originally supposed to be theirs.
And then it didn't really matter because because it's the family that doesn't live there, so who cares about their kid? And then Wayne makes the even better searching in the backyard contraption out of the hammock counterweighted by a television and like the cable box still attached to it or something.
Yeah, which that entire thing, I'm looking at it, I'm like, where's it being supported from? How did he put this together in an afternoon?
Well, he had one end of the strings tied up in his attic, and the other end of the strings he had tied up on like a nearby telephone pole. Yeah. And had the whole thing coming off of like a bar that was on a wheel. It was like very impressively thrown together in a very short amount of time.
Yeah, you give me that same project, maybe in a week.
Maybe, yeah. Especially to climb up the phone pole. I mean, that seems like an afternoon's work by itself to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was funny hearing him talk about that too in that pop culture episode where he was talking about like, oh, that was like the easiest part. I just got to lay in a hammock and say words.
Mm-hmm.
Just great. Just really wonderful. So yeah, now we're getting to the point of the movie the kids are moving on from the safety of this rock that they were briefly at, which is like halfway across the yard. They calculated that for them, the yard was about 3 miles long. Mm-hmm. That was about their trip. So they're like halfway through their journey, and they find what looked like the most delicious thing I'd ever seen when I was a kid, which is the giant oatmeal cookie.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, I wanted that thing so bad when I was a kid. I'm like, I just want to interact with a cookie that's this large, please.
Yeah, every time. Yeah, I would have one of those as a kid. You just think about that movie.
Yeah.
And then I showed this movie to my son last year, and after seeing it, I went out and I got some of those Little Debbie oatmeal cream pies to be like, this is the thing from the movie. And those do not hold up as well as this movie does.
No, they're not good. No, those occasionally wind up at craft service tables, and I tried one a couple years ago, and I was just thoroughly bummed out, actually. But those will be making
Were you
it
thinking about Honey, I Shrunk the Kids when you ate it?
It's very possible that I was like, oh, this doesn't taste as good as that giant one looked.
Yeah. If they left like one of the Swiss cake rolls or a ding dong or something, maybe.
Yeah. Ding dong. Anytime ding dongs come up, I just think of Weird Al's Fat video, where it's the intro and the guy's just going like, "Yo, ding dong, man, ding dong," trying to get Al to just buckle and eat it. Oh man. Anyway, ding dongs. And the ant friend.
They meet Auntie.
Just beautiful. Auntie is beautiful. It's just an amazing creation. He was stop motion. He was a full animatronic. He was a partial animatronic. He was all the effects, and it's just a wonderful sell all the way through with his character.
Yeah, it was just so great. And Disney yet again making movies about shrinking people that befriend ants that die at the end.
I have a note about how he dies. It's like really sad, actually. It's really dark.
He's just a baby.
He is just a baby.
They say that several times.
Yeah. I think it's also because I also noticed on the IMDb cast list, Frank Welker is a voice in this movie. So I wonder if it was Frank Welker doing the ant sounds.
I'm sure it was Frank Welker doing the ant sounds and even the scorpion sounds and any creature sounds.
Yeah. Oh, probably maybe the butterfly, like they first see when they're first small.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then like using the ant as a sled dog is just great. And of course, dog-induced contraption antics when Quark sees like the dangling rope on the spinning hammock contraption just goes for it and twists up Wayne, and then Wayne goes like launching into Russell's backyard into the pool. And then Russell just kind of shakes his head. Like there's no follow-up on that. Just like,
I'm going out there to yell at him.
Just like,
threaten to beat him up.
That's my next door neighbor. That's Zelensky.
Which Rick Moranis actually did that stunt.
Did he?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, throw me across the fence. That sounds great.
I had a note in here that there was a cut in there that I really liked when he was in the contraption and he's looking around, and they have the shot of him going over and like looking directly into the camera with the magnifying glass, and it cuts to like these huge leaves of what you think is grass, and it's the house plant inside of the Thompson house.
Oh, that's right. That is a great cut. Yeah, because it's that wonderful, like the camera's like straight up down here and just looking straight up, and Wayne passes over. Yeah, it's a great cut. And this is now Russell's wife. What's this other family called? The Thompsons. The Thompsons have called the police because they are reasonable human beings that don't understand that a mad scientist has shrunk their children. So they call the police, which is a reasonable course of action. But of course, as many people in the nation have been learning, these cops are just as much useless assholes as anybody. But not that they could have helped in this, but they are kind of like unhelpful jerk police. And
which the guy who said this is his only credit on IMDb.
He does pretty well. There is a funny follow-up gag with these cops because Diane calls too because she doesn't know the kids are yet shrunk. And so they get back into their car, they see if they have another call for 2 missing kids, and then it's from the Zelensky house. And I don't know if you noticed this, Travis, but there's this detail on the screen that the Zelenskys have 12 noise complaints against them, or 12 counts of disturbing the peace or something, and it's like, oh yeah, that's Russell Thompson calling the police on Zelensky all the time. Thought that was really funny. And then we get the titular line scene where Wayne tells Diane what's going on, and that's a perfect scene. It's a really funny, really great little scene.
It's great.
All the
he's wearing the
his
helmet with the lights and the magnifying glass, and he's got to turn his head so that she can see the couch.
Yeah, like she just grabs the magnifying glass and like wrestles his head kind of, and then the police show up and she faints, and it's like it's a really funny scene. It's a really, really tight, funny little scene. And I do love also, like, so often, especially in movies that we've talked about, like, families accept these fantastical realities for no reason other than the movie needs them to. You know, like for example, again, the same actress accepting the reality of like her dead husband Alan Thicke being in a robot and you thought your parents were weird. But in this, it's like Wayne is like, okay, look at the couch, and she's like, oh my god, it works. So she like actually understands and respects her husband's work, and understands like, oh yes, you have been working on this and it worked. So it's not actually a leap for once. It's not actually a leap for the spouse to believe the absurd science fiction reality with which she's being presented.
Yeah. She's familiar with the machine he's been working on.
Right.
As well. Whereas, and you thought your parents were weird. When she sees the robot for the first time, she's like, oh, this is the thing.
Right.
That I've not seen until now.
So I think that was a nice, it's not like a huge thing, but it's like this kind of like, just a subtle little thing, like her buying it makes sense for once inside the movie universe.
Yeah. There's also this stuff like their relationship that's implied at the beginning. Like they had a fight the night before and she slept at her mom's, which I'd never really like paid attention to as a kid, but watching it as an adult, I'm like, whoa. This is there seems to be some characterization that, because like I said, all the characters have their arcs, and that's actually coming up where like all their arcs kind of start getting realized all around the same time. But at the same time, it's not as, those things aren't as shaded in as maybe they could be, because we're spending so much time on the adventure aspect of the movie, which again isn't something to like fault the movie with necessarily, but like there is this subtext that I didn't really get until this most recent time around, because like Nick asks at the very end, like, are you and Amy asks at the end, like, are you and Dad okay? I think, right? Yeah. And and yeah, and because Wayne's arc, I mean, I'm jumping ahead. I'm just going to jump ahead to get to this note, and because I'm talking about it now. Like all at the same time, kind of like Russ realizes that he isn't as connected to his kids as he probably should be, and Wayne realizes he's too invested in his work, and that's kind of the only thing for Wayne, really. Like I feel like that arc is better defined in Russ than it is in Wayne. I'd say so.
I think it's really clearly defined in Russ, and I think his arc is actually maybe, of like, if you're just looking at like what the characters go through in the course of the film, his arc is like maybe the strongest in terms of like change from beginning to end. But yeah, Wayne's like getting lost in his work at the cost of his family. I don't know how clearly that comes across at the very beginning of the film. Yeah, that's all.
Yeah.
And then the kids in this, like very close to that same scene, get their, little Russ realizing that something, just like getting in touch with himself and realizing kind of who he is as a person. He's like a more sensitive guy than maybe his dad wants him to be. And Amy realizing that like popularity isn't everything, but like also I don't know if we really knew that she was like a popular kid before she talks about being a popular kid in that scene. Did I miss something?
I don't know how clear that was up until that.
So that's a little muddy, but characters have arcs, and that's my point.
Yeah. And you've got like the Ron Thompson character like connecting with Auntie,
right,
and
growing the feelings a bit, becoming less insufferable. And like I also noted, like all of these character things are like totally schmaltzy, like kids movie stuff, but like all the performances all around, and the character turns are predictable, but the performances all around are like charming enough that it just doesn't matter. The movie succeeds, like is wildly successful despite these like little shortcomings. Yeah, but backtracking a little bit is where Ron becomes he like connects with Auntie and he becomes a better person there. I made the note that I love that Wayne has enough like random parts to construct another headlight and magnification helmet for Diane, and it's like different parts. He has different floodlights and like a different helmet, a different yeah, just like smoking subplot in this movie is something you'd never see in a Disney movie now entirely.
Or I mean, how many movies period?
True. I mean, but I feel like especially a Disney film.
Yeah.
And it's like that was part of the character. Like he only smoked, like he, as a kid said, he only smokes when he's really worried. The movie,
which they took that as like, oh, it's a Dad's actually, he cares about
Right,
us.
Dad's concerned about us. And again, Matt Frewer's character has a pretty good arc in this movie. Yeah. The huge Lego is a nice touch. I like the huge Lego.
They get to sleep in.
Um,
And then they send Auntie off, Harry and the Henderson style.
or they try. You don't go Harry and the Henderson style. And that's interesting too. Like, thinking about that as a kid, you buy that, and I buy that as an adult. In context of the movie, I totally buy it. But just like as an adult, I'm thinking like, there's no way you can communicate with an ant. There's no way.
That's not how they do it.
They
even hear you.
Right, like the stick with food, like to make him go. I 1,000,000% buy that for ant behavior, like 1,000,000%. But like trying to be like, go, and then the ant being like, no, but I like you guys, I'll protect you. I'm like, that's not how ant brains go.
No.
But it works great in the movie.
Yeah.
And then of course we get to the scorpion fight. Did I jump ahead too far and I missed something that you had a note about?
Oh no,
Okay.
not at all. No. Yeah. Terrifying, and
That's also the word I had, was terrifying. The scorpion is so scary. And that's Phil Tippett's studio. The Scorpion.
is.
And
just scary and on the edge of your seat, and then super sad knowing where it goes and how it happens.
So like during the course of the fight, the scorpion stabs Auntie in the back, and Auntie goes down, and then the kids kind of fight off the scorpion with torches and sticks. And then they're like, oh, where's Auntie? Where's Auntie? They go find Auntie, and then Ron is so sad and just goes, he's gonna be okay. And then Auntie immediately thereupon dies. Just like immediately after, like, he's gonna be okay, and then it's the slump. Just dark. That's like a really dark part of the movie.
Would have preferred a fifth kid die.
Would have preferred than Auntie. Maybe if Ron died. Maybe if Ron was the fifth kid, and you're just like, oh, Ron's dead. Great. We don't have to see Ron. I also want to say that while that scorpion is so terrifying, that this movie gave me an unrealistic expectation regarding the prevalence of scorpions in neighborhood backyards.
Yeah.
Because scorpions, I don't think, are very common to many backyard climates in the United States. Or at least not where I grew up, they were not. Maybe there's other parts of the U.S. where you really have to worry about scorpions in your backyard, and I'm just, like, uninformed about these areas. But, you know...
As a kid, the scorpions were terrifying. Between this movie and Hook with the boo box.
Yeah. Yeah, like, chuck scorpions right up there with, like, quicksand as things that I thought were going to be huge issues as an adult, but we're not. Yeah. Auntie dies, right? It's the next morning now. We have the kid coming back over to mow the lawn. Tommy comes back over to mow the lawn.
Wayne falls asleep doing his work.
Who says... I wrote down a quote because I just really liked this set of words, but I didn't write down who said it, and I can't remember. Something's very weird here. Who said that? Somebody said something's very weird here, and I like that line. It's a great set of words. I don't know.
I don't know who said that.
It's in this part of the movie. I have it under the remote control lawnmower headline. Anyway, there's this little comedy moment, and like to describe it takes longer than the moment takes to happen. But so like Wayne like basically reconstructed his machine, fell asleep. Diane wakes him up. They're gonna eat breakfast. Then they hear the lawnmower. Oh no, breakfast is after. They stop and then they have breakfast after the lawnmower thing. But they're in the attic. They hear the lawnmower. Then they run outside. They run downstairs, run to the backyard to save the children from being cut up by the lawnmower.
The whole lawnmower,
which is
again terrifying.
Amazing, terrifying. The prop of the lawnmower, the remote controlled lawnmower, is a wonderful thing.
Again, the score.
So great.
Like one of my favorite tracks in the score. It's got the organ that just like announces the doom that the lawnmower is bringing.
Yeah, that church organ sound. Yeah. But there's this moment when they're trying to run out the back door, like Wayne gets to the back door. It opens inward, so he starts to open it. Diane comes up right behind him, like crashes into him, which forces the door closed. And then he just like gives her a look and then like opens the door and they leave. I just love that he turns around and was like, why did you do that?
You know how this door works. Do you think that was like an improv kind of a thing?
I think so. I think that was just like a little Rick Moranis reaction thing. Or just like that's probably what physically happened. Like she ran into him, the door closed. But that's just a great, great little comedy beat. And maybe it wasn't funny to me when I was a kid, but it's really funny to me now. Because it also reminds me of a moment in Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey where where the kids are about to be sucked into the lawnmower. Because what happens is the parents come out. Tommy just stops working on the lawnmower. He just lets go of the control, so it just stays in one place and is going to suck the kids out of their hiding space in the earthworm hole. Yeah. And like there's one point where like they're all screaming. Amy's just screaming, and then Amy pauses the screaming to assess the totality of the danger, and then resumes screaming at the exact same pitch at which she just was. Which I always really liked. I loved like the pausing to assess and then just like, oh no, it's bad. Ah! Like, and that reminds me of this moment in Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey when they're going to hell and they're falling down that never-ending pit, and like they're just screaming and screaming and screaming, and then they're just still falling, and they're just like, dude, this is a totally deep hole. Yeah. And they shrug and just go back to screaming because they don't know what else to do. So yeah, love that moment. And then the kids, the lawnmower's turned off. They almost get rescued, but not quite.
Send Tommy off because it's safer.
Because it's safer to go through the house, yeah.
And then Tommy he's watched them assessing what has happened. And as he leaves, he shakes his head and he goes, and I thought my folks were weird. Announcing the next movie that we would see her.
Yes. Foreshadowing reality. And then the kids escape on the dog, which I always loved, like the look of the dog hair close up, like these big foam strands or whatever they actually were. And of course the dog has to get past like the evil cat. That's the next door neighbor's cat. I just wanted to go on record as saying I disagree with this movie's view of cats.
Yeah, they always have to portray the cats in the villainous way.
I know. I'm not with it, Disney. Cats aren't the villains. Cats are the ones keeping the mice away from the farm. Just saying. Cats are the best. Better than dogs. I know you have dogs too. I'm sorry.
Just cats.
Oh, just cats now? Oh, that's right. I remember. I didn't know you hadn't gotten a new dog yet, though. Anyway.
No.
Digressions. But now we get into the sequence where they find the kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the entirety, again, another perfect sequence in the movie. The entirety of the cereal bowl sequence and with Nick and the spoon and just like everything. Like the whole sequence is just so great.
Yeah. I mean, and thank goodness they got on the dog too, because getting to the house is one thing, and then getting inside the house and getting their parents' attention.
Yeah.
What was the plan there?
I think maybe it never even hit me that hard as a kid that they really understood that the dog was the only thing that could really hear them, and were exploiting that as much as they could. And I like that. That's like, I thought that was a nice little plot device.
Yeah, because they try to do that at the beginning, and then the cat shoos the dog away. Right.
This evil cat. Do not agree. But yeah, I mean, this is, that scene and the imagery from that scene is like rightfully famous because it's just so good. So Wayne finds him. It's great. Wayne finds him, and they get him up, and they're trying to figure out what's wrong with the machine. Why it's still just blowing up apples. They have the Thompsons over, and they communicate through charades and a magnifying glass that it's the baseball. They figure it out, and this is just another like mechanic thing that like why did it do this? So we see it blow up an apple again, and then they learn what the thing is. And then wouldn't the next course of action to you to just try it on an apple again?
Another inanimate object, yes.
Rather than like going straight to human?
Has to be a person.
Which, like, I understand it for the mechanics of the movie. Like, it just needs to go at that point. We don't want to see another Apple thing. We just want things to happen now. But that just struck me as funny. And then I always thought the gag with, like, Russ's hat being too big for him afterward. Like, he stayed a little bit small. I think that's a really funny gag.
Yeah.
Yeah, I already talked about, like, wouldn't it be more effective to just remove the laser? And yeah, kids are big now. This nice reunion scene, you know, she doesn't care. Amy doesn't care about popularity. She'll go to the dance with Russ. The dads shake hands. You know, it's a nice little ending. And they have Thanksgiving with a
giant turkey,
which foreshadows the sequel.
Yes.
Oh yeah, and the giant dog treat. Now, here's the thing that struck me for the first time viewing it today is if every part of that food is enlarged, the texture also has to be really enlarged, right? So wouldn't the texture, like enlarged turkey texture, be really weird? Like really weird?
I'm sure it would be. I kind of had a similar thought while they're eating the big cookie.
Right. Like, wouldn't you?
It wouldn't be creamy like that. It would be
right. It'd
have like giant granules of sugar.
Right. Like it's almost down to constituent parts at that point, right? Like, so yeah. I don't think I would want to eat big food. Is my only point. I think the texture would be very weird. And the last joke in the movie is like, I get it, French class, which I actually think is just a really bad joke.
But they go out on it.
They wanted to go out on that joke, and it's just not a very good joke. But whatever, movie, you do you, because the rest of it's so good that you can forgive like a bad joke at the very end of it. So yeah, that's. Did I skip over anything that you wanted to bring up during the course of the movie?
No, really. The only thing I wanted to say was my favorite line in the movie, which is when they're explaining to the Thompsons what happened. And they're like, wait, what are you saying that machine blew up my kids? And Wayne goes, no. If the machine had blown up the kids, there'd be pieces of them everywhere.
I wrote that line down too. Yeah, that's really classic. Yeah, that's Wayne Zielinski's problem, right? That's his like character's problem encapsulated in that line is he's not thinking about like, oh no, I will reassure you by saying no, your kids are safe. Instead, it's like, oh no, it doesn't work that way. Like if it worked that way, like you'd be gore everywhere. You know, it's like very classic mad scientist-y kind of stuff. Yeah, and Russ is like so Russ was really like anti-science in general in that scene too, which struck me as I kind of have an idea of what kind of a modern day person Matt Frewer's character would be if he had that attitude toward the scientist next door. But yeah, I just thought that was funny. These people hate Wayne so much. Yeah, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. What a great movie.
Yeah, they hate him. All of his colleagues hate him.
Right, totally. But his family loves him again, so it's all good. And they go to a vacation in Vegas in the next movie. So who can be mad at that? It goes, their family is so good. The relationship that he has with his wife is so good after this movie that by the time the next one rolls around, they have a 2-year-old.
Yeah, that's true.
They got down to business, as it were.
Then Amy goes off to college.
Yeah.
Which we'll discuss that.
Yeah, we haven't officially announced it, but we might as well right now. We have discussed it. We're just totally going to watch Honey, I Blew Up the Kid for next week's episode. Because, yeah, I always really liked Honey, I Blew Up the Kid, and it's definitely, I haven't seen it in a longer period of time than Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. So I'm very interested for that, especially as we both know it was adapted. You reminded me of the original title of the movie, which was Big Baby.
Yes.
It was originally a totally unrelated screenplay called Big Baby that Disney was like, oh, we could totally make this Honey, I Shrunk the Kids sequel. which I kind of love when movies do that, where it's just like an unrelated spec script. It's like, oh, this could fit very easily into something that we already have an audience for. Let's do that.
Yeah. Or something that was meant to be another series, like Die Hard with a Vengeance was originally going to be a Lethal Weapon movie.
That's right. That kind of stuff. I think some movie was supposed to be Under Siege 2 and then became a different movie altogether. I can't remember what that was either. But it happens in the reverse way sometimes too.
Yes.
Not so much anymore. I think that's a less common thing as studios have just become kind of more reliant on just like using writers like, you know, like totally replaceable people and just like hammering a franchise to the ground.
But yeah, that's what they do.
That's what they do.
Yeah, that's
people with the money.
Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, which is just still a great movie. Holds up all around visually and just with the performances and the sets. It's and the James Horner score. And I believe this is still Joe Johnston's best movie.
That's probably true. Yeah, I think that's almost certainly true. Yeah, good work, Joe Johnston.
One of my earliest memories seeing a movie in the theater is this movie.
Oh, nice. That's cool. It's possible I saw this one in the theater, but I don't recall. I know I had it on tape as a kid, and I know I had it on tape as a kid before I was able to read, because it had a big... Before I was able to really read, my parents would just put a big letter that denoted the movie. So, like, my Alice in Wonderland tape had a big A on it, and on Honey, I Shrunk the Kids was a big H. I knew that was my Honey, I Shrunk the Kids tape.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure it retained... I'm pretty sure my dad dubbed it from a rental, and so Tummy Trouble was on the front of it. My dad had 2 VCRs, and one of them was from before Macrovision copy protection was a thing, so it didn't look for it. So anytime he rented a movie, he would dub the movie usually. Yeah, Alex Brunel history. So yeah, I think that taps me out on talking about this movie, dude.
All right. Well, we'll be back to discuss the Zelenskys' further adventures next week.
Yes.
And make something big.
Yes. In the meantime, if you have videotapes or anything, or mini DV tapes that you'd like to have digitized, give me a shout over on my Twitter or Instagram, which is @AlexBrunel. And Travis, what words do you have?
I mean, as of right now, you can find the show, Who Watches Pod, on Twitter. We're on Facebook, obviously, if you're watching us on that stream. We're on Instagram at Who Watches Podcast. You can reach the show at whowatchespodcast@gmail.com. You can find the podcast feed anywhere you find podcasts. Please subscribe, leave reviews. They help us out, and we appreciate it.
Yep, we do. And we'll be back next week to talk at you about Honey, I Blew Up the Kid.
Yes.
All right.
So, in the meantime, please stay safe, stay sane, and stay smiling.